Welcome to You, Me, Empathy. Thank you for listening. We would like to remind you that this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Known as just a silly boy with a feely heart. Please consider supporting the show. Check us out on Patreon or simply leave a review on iTunes. Here's your host and creator of the show, Known Wells.
Hello, feely humans. Welcome to episode 49 of You, Me, Empathy. On this episode, I talk with Work It Health co-founder and co-CEO Robin McIntosh about alcoholism and evidence-based recovery. We also explore anorexia and bulimia, purging, and so there's a trigger warning there: binging, purging, and restricting, and a brief mention of sexual assault are mentioned in this episode, just to let you know about that. Before we get to the episode with Robin, I wanted to read a new iTunes review. Yay, new iTunes reviews! Thank you. Thank you. Please leave me all the praise in iTunes. It warms my heart, and it's a free way to support the show. So this one is called The Beauty of Empathy by Groovy Mojo, aka Ray. This is my friend Ray, you guys. Ray says, quote, "Known Wells is a human person who embodies the qualities of kindness and empathy as beautifully as anyone I've ever met. Disclosure, yes, he's a friend of mine. This podcast is a must listen if you're a human who wants to be more human. It's also the best pro-witch podcast out there. Confused? You better get listening." End quote. That's true. You, Me, Empathy is very pro-witch. We're also pro-wizard. We're pro all creatures of the earth. So, if you are a witch, youmeempathy@gmail.com is where you can hit me up and say hello. Hit me up. Ugh, I don't know why I just said that. Anyways, it's a pro-feely human podcast. Witches included, wizards included, all creatures, big and small. Thank you for that beautiful review, Ray. You fill my heart, and I thank you. And listeners, again, please, if you haven't left a review, go do that. It's a free way to support the show, and it perhaps, potentially, the algorithm of Apple will say, hey, new reviews. I'm going to get this show in front of more people. Perhaps, who knows? And more people immersed in empathy and these conversations about mental health, the better. That's what I say. Okay. Before we get to the episode, one more thing. Sorry, guys. It's Friday, and it's the day after Thanksgiving as I'm recording this, and I'm feeling like I drank too much yesterday, and I'm feeling my body's a little off. And for someone like me who's struggled with anorexia and body image and things like that, that's a little triggering for me. I don't like the feeling of that, and I'm wondering if you can relate. So let me know. You can let me know, DM at YouMeEmpathy on Instagram, or you can email me, youmeempathy@gmail.com, or on Twitter at YouMeEmpathy. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, let's get into this episode finally. This is episode 49 on alcoholism and evidence-based recovery with Robin McIntosh.
La 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 la, you, me, empathy, yeah, la la la.
Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, a podcast about exploring the struggles we face in our day-to-day lives as humans trying to get by on this wondrous and overwhelming pale blue dot. The intent of You, Me, Empathy is to talk openly, without judgment, about our neuroses, our mental illnesses, our shared anxieties and worries, to create a dialogue that is vulnerable and deeply human and empathetic, and to share that dialogue with others to inspire emotional and cognitive collaboration and insight so we can, hand in hand, break down the stigma that make us feel shame and guilt for struggling, for feeling our feelings, for being human. Yumi Empathy is a safe, friendly space designed to inspire the beauty in each of us. Today, I am grateful to explore addiction with entrepreneur, designer, and a human who is thriving in recovery and co-CEO, co-founder of Work It Health, Robin McIntosh. Hello, Robin.
Hi. Hi.
How are you?
Good. I like that word, thriving in recovery.
Well,
Thank
it's
you.
something I think I grabbed on an interview you did or the Work It website or something. And I was like, ooh, I like that too. So
Yeah. Some days I thrive. That's the goal. So
indeed.
yeah, to be here. I'm such a big fan and I've known you for a long time. So I'm excited to kind of have this conversation today.
Well, I'm very happy to have you and just to catch up. So before we always kind of start off the show talking about just having an emotional check-in. So that's kind of how our weeks have been, how our day is going. How are you doing today, Robin?
I am doing okay. I just got off the phone with our head of operations, Kate Monty. She is one of the most talented, wonderful people in my life. And she is, learning so much every day. And we just had a really nice heart-to-heart about where we are with things and where she is with managing her team. And it's wonderful. I got off the phone and those are the moments that I love about working with a team and really creating the world that we want to live in. So that was really inspiring. And we just got off at like 2:59. So
Excellent.
So I'm riding high off of that.
That's great. It's so good to have people around you that inspire you, that sort of are your mirrors and who sort of make you a little better, you know?
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
Awesome. Well, that's good. As for me, before we got started, we were talking about my house stuff, and by the time this episode comes out, listeners, I will most likely be in my new house. Jessica and I bought a house, and we are immediately house poor. That's kind of a joke, but lately, just been trying to take it one day at a time. That's sort of my methodology for the past week. It doesn't always work. I kind of try to get ahead of myself, thinking about all the things that goes into buying a home and the stress of it, and it just feels a little overwhelming. But that's where I am. It's a little anxious, a bit of an anxious place, but I'm working on it and I'm acknowledging it. So that's the first step.
Yeah. Hold on. I'm putting my phone on airplane mode.
Sure.
That's wonderful. When do you close on escrow?
It should be next week. So about 8:30. So August 30th. So a week from today as we're recording this. Yeah.
Wow.
I know.
Cool.
I know.
And I was listening to a previous podcast. You were saying that it's in horse country, or which part of Orange County is it in?
It's in the city of Trabuco Canyon.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah. So we, Jessica and I have horses. We have 2 horses. There's a lot of people in that area, that community that have horses, and it's kind of funky. It's a little bit feels like off the gritty, in some ways, which we like. And the house has, these big, beautiful oak trees that sort of reach toward the sky and remind me of fantasy novels in some ways, the way they sort of twist and turn. And it's tiny and quirky and kind of perfect for us. So I'm excited.
Wow, that sounds so heavenly. It sounds so beautiful. I love that you guys have horses. Do you get out a lot and ride around on them? I don't know how people interact with horses.
No, it's a perfectly reasonable question. I don't. I used to ride with Jessica for a few years, but it's kind of hard on my back. I have sort of ongoing chronic back issues. She does ride though, not as much as she'd like. being a full-time professor, she doesn't have the time that she would like to ride them, but she does whenever she can.
Mm-hmm. She's such a wonderful person. I do remember, I one time went to a house party with you guys, or house. I think it was like some sort of housewarming, and it was right before I left the Orange County area for San Francisco. I moved up here for art school. And I remember talking to her at that party about philosophy, and I think we were talking about Nietzsche or something. We had this great kind of drill down into existentialism alongside, ranch dip or something. I remember friending her on Facebook and really wanting to be closer to her. I think she's such a light, and so magnanimous, so kind to me. I was only, 23 and really nervous around people. And yeah, she's awesome. I'm glad that she's doing well.
Wow, that's so good to hear. And maybe this will be the inspiration for her to finally listen to this podcast. I do remember that. I sort of remember that. I was telling your sister, Cassandra, that I have the memory of a goldfish, so I apologize. But so for the listeners, to paint the sort of backstory here, Robin and I used to work together a long time ago, and we, I guess, had a housewarming party or a little gathering. I don't remember where that would have been. Was it at like a house or was it an apartment?
I have a memory of an elephant, or a goldfish and an elephant. I remember, I have a crystal clear memory for most things. And you remember it was in this little house, and it was off of, it's called, I think it was like the city of Orange or something, or like Orange Circle, like where all those thrift stores. You guys had just moved there. And I think other people that we worked with were there too. And I just stopped by for a second. But I ended up leaving, and then I moved, and I was so regretful. I was like, I wish I could have been closer to Jessica,
Yeah.
I wish I could have gotten to know her better. But does that ring a bell, or am I completely making that up?
We never lived near the Circle. We lived in an apartment in Orange, like off of Palmyra. That was kind of closer to, it was kind of a grungy area. It was kind of closer to the freeway. And then we also we rented a room out of this house in Orange, but that was in Orange Park Acres. I'm just like, I'm terrible with the timeline, but.
Yeah, I think it was an apartment. And I don't know Orange at all. It was probably the only time I've ever been there. So yeah. I'm probably kind of, pushing the Circle way closer to you than it actually was. So, but no, it was a party.
Well, it's good to hear that you struck a chord with Jessica. That's nice to hear, and I'll make sure to let her know.
Yeah, great. Please do.
So, listeners, today, we are going to be talking about addiction and Robin's story herself and the work she's doing with Work It Health, which is the company she is the co-CEO and co-founder of, with her partner. What's her name again?
Lisa McLaughlin.
And so before we get into that, I wanted to ask you, Robin, and this is perhaps a big question, so just take it as you wish. Give me some seminal moments from childhood, from early adulthood, wherever you want to choose, seminal moments that speak to who you are today.
Ooh, that's a biggie.
I know.
It's a big question.
I like to start big.
I respect it. Okay. Well, my sister. So I was born into a family with two younger sisters, and I think a seminal moment of any oldest child is being the oldest child and going, we're all a year and a half apart, but I've always very much felt like the oldest. I was, when I was little, I was very bossy and probably a little bit precocious, and I liked telling them what to do. And we had plenty of, art shows and plays, and I was always the director, just kind of, I really liked that. I was always like, there were points where I was their therapist, and I made them sit in a little chair and pay me 10 cents to hear their problems. And, I'm sure they have different recollections of all of this, but I really loved being the oldest, and I love my sisters very much, and they're such fascinating people. So I think they contribute a lot to who I am today. And my two parents are both Canadian. They're from Canada, around Toronto. And when we were younger, we grew up in Florida, but also had a place in Canada. So we kind of split our time between Florida and Canada. And the stark contrast between those two places, I think, kind of set up a way of living and a way of thinking of home as a malleable thing. Home to me, concept is very flexible. It's very people oriented. It's very feeling oriented, but it's not necessarily rooted in place. And I think that's been really helpful as somebody that's, lived in multiple states and multiple countries and kind of pulled geographics, which is what we say in recovery. Like, you pull a geographic when you want to escape somewhere. All of that kind of contributed to my flexible idea of home. And then, I don't know. I was always very much a creative person. I think that's kind of interesting about being an entrepreneur and being a businesswoman. I studied creative writing, and then I went to art school for graduate school. I actually got a second undergrad degree, but, I studied creative writing in my undergrad, and then I went back to school for art and design, but I grew up with two entrepreneurial parents. So I sort of ended up in the entrepreneurial world and being the CEO of this company by chance. I think the creativity lends itself these days to world building. I like to believe that we're building a new world, not only for ourselves as a team, but our patients and the wider world, that's kind of, hopefully that's answering the question a little bit.
Totally. Yeah, that's great. And it's all very fascinating. What kind of, did you feel very comfortable to sort of explore? And, you had said your parents are entrepreneurs. Did you feel that? Did you pick up on that from them?
Oh my goodness. Yes. So my dad was very influential in my life. So we only had obviously, I just said that, we have three girls in the family. So I never had any brothers. And for us, I didn't really understand like the concept of sexism or the glass ceiling or any of that until I was much older, kind of out in the real world. So my dad treated us like little entrepreneurs. So I remember my sister was working at Dippin' Dots in Colorado later.
I remember that place.
Yeah, it was one of those strange little huts off the main thoroughfare of Breckenridge in Colorado. And his response, she comes home and she's tired and she's talking about management style, or she doesn't like her manager or something like that. And his response is, well, let's buy the store. I'll give you the funds. Let's buy the store. And she's like, I'm in high school. I don't want to buy Dippin' Dots, But he was always very much like that. I had a really interesting conversation over the summer. I was in France, actually, with a good friend of mine, and we were talking with her family about family mottos and this idea that you grow up in a culture and your family unit has lore, right? And mottos, and kind of curates what your way of looking at the world. And for us, it was all centered around being an entrepreneur, be your own boss. Don't make the wrong people rich. I think I have 3 copies of Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office that my dad likes to send me sometimes. We just grew up in this world where you could make things, and and entrepreneurial pursuits were stable too. He always framed it as always depend on yourself, always rely on yourself. And I always thought of starting your own business as less risky than working for somebody else, which I think is an inversion of what most people think when they think of going off and starting their own thing. I think most people do it because they're scared to. But I was sort of the opposite. So, yeah.
Well, it sounded like, your parents and your father especially created a very safe environment to explore that stuff. And that's not always the case. Like, you hear about kids who, their parents do it in a way that seems a bit more like, you have to do this, right? And then the kid rebels.
Yeah.
But it seems that wasn't the case for you.
No, not at all. And then my mother is a total powerhouse. She always had her graphic design studio. So she always did her own thing as well. And she's really creative and a great designer. So between the two of them, my dad, more traditional business in real estate and commercial real estate, and my mom was graphic design. So between the two of them, we had a really safe space to, embark on our own endeavors. Like every time I had a book that I wrote, I loved making my own things. I begged for a typewriter, when I was, which is so funny because computers were out, so, but I wanted a typewriter.
You're a little hipster.
Yeah, it was like a little hipster move. And she got me one of those Brother typewriters and she was like, well, Robin, you have to use it. And I pounded out my first novel. It was like, I think it was Sarah of the Seven Seas. And, she bound it. She made like an illustration for the cover and she always took it so seriously. And I think that was a really important part as well, is that like they weren't just kind of fledgling dreams for them and for us. They were real things that we were putting into the world to be taken seriously. And I still treat my projects that way with a lot of gravity.
That's amazing. I think that's such a beautiful thing that your parents gave you. Because you hear, I'm like painting, like I'm projecting here on my own experience, but like there's this idea that I've talked about this on the show, but like it bothers me. This idea that children are less than because they're younger, right? Like it's like age sort of dictates value in some way. Yeah. And it's so refreshing and amazing to hear that there was none of that in your household.
No, none of that. And especially as the oldest, maybe Cassie and Jackie, my sisters, would have a different take. But for me, because I was the oldest kid, I was taken even more seriously and maybe too much sometimes. Like there was a lot of, set an example for your sisters and like, you're better than this and you're a McIntosh, like that means something, a lot of pressure. And I think later when I rebelled, especially when I got into alcoholism and eating disorder stuff, I blew so far off the path. And I think there was a lot of reconciliation of who I wanted to be and what diseases I had and how to kind of navigate those two personas and those two things. But when I was growing up, no, it was wonderful. And now, as a 33-year-old, I very much welcome that responsibility. I think I love the agency. I love getting older because I like when people take me more and more seriously, Yeah.
I totally know. I feel the same way because I wasn't taken seriously when I was younger, and nor did I have the agency or the emotional clarity or intelligence to make the decisions that were good for me.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed.
Was there a certain point you started feeling pressure?
Good question. I think when we were older, so I didn't really feel when you're a kid, you normalize everything. Mm-hmm. So when I was in middle school or maybe in grade school, I just thought them treating me a little bit differently than my sisters was normal because I was the oldest or something, and then when you get a little bit older, you sort of realize like, oh, this is undue pressure. This is a double standard, and I think I had conflict with that. And I think my parents are pretty cool about it. I think like really the pressure that I felt in high school and in early college was for myself. I had this idea of what I wanted to be and I couldn't get there. And it was so sad. It was like trying to run underwater.
Yeah.
I just could not get there, and I tried so hard, especially in high school, to be the straight A student and perfect SATs and go to an Ivy League college and do everything that I thought a great daughter would do. And I just, like my diseases and my conflicted self were just in the way of that. And it was so painful. That was really hard.
The place that you were striving was, discounting the diseases for a second, was it unrealistic, that place?
No. I don't think so. I don't think it's unrealistic for really many people. I think I wanted Well, yes, of course, like some parts of it, of course. But no, I think that it's hard, right? Like when you grow up and people tell you you have so much potential and you get great test scores and like, you're really on this track, and then suddenly you can't fulfill it, And I've never thought I didn't have the potential, but I couldn't understand why I couldn't fulfill it. It's like they say in AA, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I would do the same thing over and over. I would study all night, but then I would binge and purge all morning and then show up to a test and not understand why my head was cloudy, or things like that. So yeah, I don't know. It's so hard, I think, but I've never really doubted my potential. I've been lucky in that way. I come from a really supportive place.
That's great.
Yeah.
When did the binging and purging start?
So, good question. So when I was, how old was I? Probably 13. I was in Canada. We spent every summer in Canada, and, all this stuff has family of origin, stuff. It's not like anyone gets sober or anyone gets sick in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. We all come from families and systems of illness. So when I was 14, I was at this photography camp at Bishop Strawn, which is a boarding school in Toronto. And it's the same boarding school my mother went to. And I've I barely have ever mentioned this story outside of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous or Eating Disorders Anonymous. But it was this boarding school my mother went to, and I was there, and she came up to visit, and she mentioned something about how the basement, they used to call, this is a horrible word, and excuse me, but they used to call it the vomitorium. It's where all the girls, such a horrible word, but I still hate that word. But all the girls, it was an all-girls school, and all of the girls would go down there after meals and throw up. And it like put a bug in my ear. I was like, oh, that's such a great idea. I don't know why that was my reaction. I should have been horrified and said, oh my goodness, that's horrible. But for me, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And so, I think I already had the genetic predisposition of being of an addict. It really runs in our family, and eating disorders really run in our family. And I had already been struggling with anorexia and starving myself and trying to be this perfect size. And then she told me about this, and it honestly hadn't occurred to me. I didn't know anyone who was bulimic. It wasn't really on any Mia sites on the internet or anything like that. And I tried it, and I was off to the races. I thought it was a wonderful solution to my problems. I thought it was great. It's a great way to kind of, deal with things.
Yeah. Now, what problem was it finding a solution for?
I think that it's hard. I don't know where, maybe I picked this up too, but I think that when I was growing up, I thought I had to look a certain way and be a certain size. And I never felt like I could attain that. And which is really later you realize, oh, it's not about the weight and it's not about the way you look, but it's about control. I had a lot of trauma in my early youth. I was raped when I was really young, when I was 12 years old, which was awful. And then my grandfather ended up killing himself and his wife and his child, which was awful. It was in the news and awful, awful. And then we just lived in a really, sheltered and just not a great place in Florida. We went to school with a lot of people that I didn't understand, or I didn't feel a part of.
Yeah.
Really, I think the focus on food and my weight and how I looked was really a way of dealing with all of those things. And yeah, so I'm one of those people that believes it's like an inner job, like a psychology problem, and mixed with a little bit of genetic predisposition and with availability. of either substances or the opportunity to diet with no adults, watching you.
Mm-hmm.
I think the flip side, right, of that childhood I described, of this really free childhood to do whatever we wanted, is that you don't really have the supervision. Nobody was watching me when I was at BSS or before. No, they didn't know that I was bulimic until late high school. No one really warned me or really had the emotional availability to talk about it. So yeah.
I can relate to that very much. And I just wanted to say that I'm sorry that you had to go through those experiences with your grandfather's family and the sexual assault. That's terrible and inhumane.
Mm-hmm.
I very much relate to that, the feeling of because I also had a pretty free childhood. I was kind of on my own a lot, and I don't know if that was part of my own eating disorder story, but it was certainly a thing that became something that was just mine and mine alone, and I didn't feel like I had any openings for speaking to anyone about it. Did you, at what point, you said in high school, how did that come about? How did that knowledge get transferred over to your family?
Oh, I don't remember the exact moment, but I think it was one of those things where I was losing weight, but eating a lot, and then they running to the bathroom. I think it became really obvious that I had a serious problem with bulimia and anorexia stuff. And I remember this one time my dad confronted me about it. We had a family meeting where my mom was there and my dad was there, and I think that's it. And my mom was really quiet, but my dad, he's like one of the most soft-spoken people. He's very very chill guy. Mm-hmm. With 3 daughters, you sort of have to be. But I remember he raised his voice and he was yelling at me and said, "What is going on? What is going on? You have to be honest," because I would deny it. I'd be like, nothing's going on with me. And he didn't even have the language to describe the condition. He didn't even know what bulimia was. Yeah. I remember him looking it up in the dictionary, and back when we had dictionaries and not iPhones, Yeah. But, he didn't have any vocabulary or any language to describe an eating disorder. And how can you talk without words? What are you going to do in that situation?
Yeah, that's tough. And you're so right. The language is so important. First, understanding and learning, but also, we had a whole episode about the language of mental health. So, talking about audience and context and stuff and all that, and how important all that stuff is as well when we speak about these things. What at what point does the addiction come into play, and what substance was it?
Yeah. So I think it's so funny. It's like everything is sort of a solution, right? So the addiction came into play with alcohol when I was 18. So my eating disorder, so when I was 17, I went to boarding school in Spain, and I just kind of spiraled out of control. So I ended up getting expelled from school. And on the eve of my 18th birthday, I had to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. I remember thinking, oh, this is so just perfect. My life is over. This is awful. This is how I enter adulthood. And I flew across the Atlantic Ocean and went to my first inpatient rehab for eating disorders. So when I got out, and it was a horrible place. There was a documentary on HBO about it called Thin. Have you ever seen it?
No, I do. I have heard about that. I've heard good things.
Yeah. Oh, I think you're thinking of one that came after. This is a while ago, and it was like this horrible eating disorder facility in South Florida. It's called Thin, and it was called the Renfrew Center. And I don't know if it's still there, and maybe I shouldn't even mention it, but people were not getting recovery. They kind of just went to dry out for their and they were really watched, and it was kind of a military state. Like people would watch you go to the bathroom and, be very vigilant about your every move. So when I got out of there, it was just, in hindsight, strange. But when I got out of there, I immediately went to University of Michigan. It was like the only school that would still accept me after that expulsion. And I literally spent like 2 weeks at home and then was flown to Michigan and was like, goodbye again, So I didn't have any tools to deal with the eating disorder. And, but it was the first time I had ever really been exposed to constant availability of alcohol. And I remember my good friend, he left a box of wine in my room when I was late freshman. No, I was a freshman, at Michigan, and he left a box of wine in my room. And I've always been my entire life a horrible sleeper, really, really awful. I cannot sleep for the life of me, always dealt with that. That paired with eating disorder made nights very difficult. And one night I said, I'm going to have a glass of wine, or a mug of wine. I didn't have any glasses, a mug of wine in my dorm room. And that night was this awakening. It was like akin to a spiritual awakening. It was like this euphoric feeling that I got when I started to get this buzz, and I just felt, oh my God, this solved it. This solves it. Like, I do not need to binge and purge tonight. I have this. What an incredible solution. And I felt so much relief and euphoria. And then from there, I was off to the races. And by the time I was 24, I was such a late stage alcoholic. I was drinking vodka all day long, every day, had to wake up at like 5 a.m. to start drinking again. I had, DTs. So I had the shakes and was hallucinating, and, it was just awful. It was terrible. But, wow. It started off as like a solution to eating disorder stuff, which started as a solution to, bulimia started as a solution to anorexia, and so on and so forth.
Right. What, like at the time, that was the solution, just to kind of like numb it all? I mean, was that the sort of idea?
I don't know if I think it's numbing it all, but I'm one of those true alcoholics that when I drink, I do feel just euphoria. Mm-hmm. It's something, especially given that trauma and already a predisposition for anxiety and depression, to feel that hit of euphoria it's how I imagine heroin addicts feel. It's like, don't take that away from me, or I'm not giving that up without a fight. So it's not just numbing it. It's also this feeling of just complete satisfaction with the world and ease, and just complete serenity. I was able to sleep. I was able to look people in the eye. I was able to feel comfortable going to parties or even going to class. I would go to class drunk all the time. And I just suddenly felt like one of the living. Yeah.
Did you feel like you needed to hide it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. From the beginning. I mean, it was just weird from the beginning. So I was always conscious of alcoholism because my grandfather was a very bad alcoholic. And I grew up with a lot of, that's language we did have as a family. I knew what alcoholism was. I knew what alcohol, did to people. I knew about genetics, all of that. So from the very beginning, I hid it, to the point where no one really knew except I was drinking like a crazy amount. So the jig was up when I was a junior, and I ended up flying to studying abroad in Chile. And I ended up having to leave there and going to rehab and all this other stuff. So, but I hid it from the beginning for sure.
In what ways did it manifest in your day-to-day life? Or were you able to, do the school thing and maintain relationships and things like that?
No. College is it's a tricky place because people drink on the weekends, not even the weekends, people start on Thursday and end on Sunday, so there's tailgating, there's day drinking, there's blackout drinking, there's parties, especially at a place like University of Michigan. That's a huge party school. So I was kind of covered from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But then you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right? And I would really try not to drink during the day on those days. And I was successful at the beginning. Like when I was a freshman and a sophomore, I was more successful. But then when I became older and a junior, then I started drinking during the day. And that's when you show up to your econ like 101 exam with wine teeth, people start to mention it.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, what's going on? And then my grades started slipping and all the things you would expect, and had this really dramatic relationship with this boyfriend. Oh, it was just screaming all the time and throwing things, and it's just on and on. Pretty typical.
So when we worked together, how old were you? At what stage was this?
So when we worked together, I was 23 and I had just gotten sober. So I was probably only, 6 months sober at the time.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I've been sober for 10 years, and that was the very beginning. And so what happened to me is I went to Chile, like I was talking to you about, and then I was deported because I never went to class, and I was on a student visa, which was very ridiculous. Like, it was just, it was a low. It was a low. Yeah. And so I was deported, but then my parents they just didn't know what to do with me. So they sent me right back to Michigan. And I tried to go back they sent me to a detox center and then to Michigan, which is so funny to think back. Like, if I have a daughter or son, sure, I guess I would have, but again, no one really knows. You never know how to handle that situation. No one really understands it. So, at least back then. So I went back to school, but then I quickly dropped out. I couldn't go to class. I was just drinking all day, every day. And I was doing crazy things. In a blackout, I had like chopped off my hair and like thrown it at someone. My boyfriend would leave in the morning. We lived together in Ann Arbor, and he would take my keys, my shoes, and my ID. And it was the dead of winter. This is like winter time and November in Ann Arbor, which is freezing. And I would jump out my window and jump onto the pizza truck and like run down the street and like beg the liquor guy for money and set up a tab, just all sorts of crazy stuff. So by the time I went to rehab, it was 2005. And I went to a 30-day inpatient stay in Sierra Tucson in Arizona. And then from there, I went back to Michigan, relapsed again, went to another rehab, left in the middle of the night in a cab, relapsed again, and then finally came out to Orange County. And in Orange County, it's like a rehab mecca, as you probably know, right? Like Newport Beach, Balboa, I think it's called Balboa Peninsula. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
Tons of rehabs there. So I ended up staying there for 6 months. And right after that, I started working with you.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's my journey to California, and that's how I'm here.
So it was one of these rehabs in Orange County that stuck?
It was that. And it was a perfect storm of recovery. It was a plenty of things. So it was the end of a long line of rehabs. It was, my parents, were really angry at me, and my dad had cut me off from the family, and that was really impactful for me. I come from a wonderful family, and it was really hard not to talk to them and see them. I went to AA meetings every day and fell in line with a really dynamic, wonderful group of women. And that was so instrumental. I'm still very close with most of them, a lot of them. I'm getting married in 3 weeks.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And a lot of them are in the wedding, people have 10 years. Yeah, it's incredible. We just had like this really incredible event here in San Francisco this past weekend for my fiance and I. It was so sweet. And everyone went around the room saying how they met me. And a lot of them we met, in the very early days of recovery. And it was just so helpful for me to have that spiritual connection to other people. And, there's that. And then just aging up, like you get older and you want a different life for yourself.
Yeah. The power of you are not alone, this idea that you are not alone it's transformative.
It's transformative.
Yeah.
It's transformative. I think that's the one thing I could wish for every person that's still struggling out there is to understand. And that's why I like to do podcasts like these, and to talk about my story because, in the current addiction world and really badly in the eating disorder world, like we're told because of this model that was built in the 1930s. And I'm a big fan of AA, but it is Alcoholics Anonymous or Eating Disorder Anonymous. And you're told not to be public with your story. And I think that's really difficult for the suffering alcoholic, addict, eating disorder, what have you, person out there. I think it's a disease of isolation. Yeah. And they're out there on an island and they have no idea how many of us struggle with the same demons, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it just adds to and contributes to the stigma and within the culture at large.
Yeah.
And that's
definitely
problematic.
Yeah. And I like what you said in the intro and breaking down barriers of shame, you know, and I think it's really important that we come out with our stories and we get vulnerable and we say, this happened to me and this is how I dealt with it. And, you know, we live in such a glossy culture where we're all posting on Instagram all the time and pretending we lead these perfect lives. And it's just, it's not great. It's not great for the suffering out there. Yeah, it's all fake.
When was the first time you self-talk called yourself an addict?
Oh, good question. Well, language is very important to me. So, and in the recovery world, I was just talking to our head of marketing, Callie Lux, today, and she, you should interview her at some point if you're looking for people, because her story is incredible. She's in recovery for opioid addiction, and we were talking. There's, you know, such a pushback against language right now in the recovery world. You know, like, I'm not an addict. Don't call me an addict. Don't call me an alcoholic. But for me, naming it and being part of a group of people that identify as such was pivotal in my recovery. So when I was at Sierra Tucson, which is an inpatient facility, 30 days lockdown in Arizona, and I, you know, as I described, I was my liver was really shot. They were so shocked when I went through that detox at Sierra Tucson, and they were like, you have the liver of a 90-year-old man. Like, you know,
wow,
you're gonna die. And, you know, I was like 90 pounds, like very skinny and bruised and just bloated in the face and just really not doing well. And, you know, 2 weeks in, I was laying on this field outside with a friend of mine from Tennessee, a friend that I had met there. And I said to her, you know, when I get out, I really want to experiment with what Winston Churchill did with always having a little bit of alcohol inside of me. I think I can really do that. You know, and it was just, I think back on that and I think, oh my God, like that's like the height of denial. You're at a rehab center planning how you're always going to be a little bit loaded later.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think that's so true. It's the obsession of every alcoholic, addict, person that's still in the throes of addiction or a process disease like bulimia or anorexia. We always think that we have control. Like, next week it'll be different, or maybe I can change it next week, or if only I did this or that, if only my parents were nice to me, or if only my spouse was, you know, doing like cleaning up after our kids. Like, if only. I've heard so many different reasons and excuses for drinking and using and all of that. And for me, the pivotal moment was when I was in Orange County and I went to AA and I fell in line with a lot of people that use the word alcoholism and addict a lot. And I related so much, and I realized like what that meant. Like, I realized the definition of alcoholism for me was, I don't know, you know, I can't help but start again, right? And when I do start again, when I drink again, I don't know when it's going to stop. And that definition was pivotal. Like, for some reason it clicked in my brain. Oh, I can't control this. Oh, this is not something that I have a choice over. And unless I have to stay here and get better. So that, I guess it was really the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that gave me that language.
Wow. Yeah. It's so amazing how just giving something a name, defining it, can be a huge step toward starting to understand that thing, right? Because when we don't have the words, it's, you know, just this amorphous thing that we're trying to wrap our head around. But naming it has context and grounding in, you know, further critical thinking, understanding, learning, all that stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think I think that, I don't know. Yeah, I agree. And it connects us, right? Like when you're a person with an eating disorder in recovery and I'm a person with an eating disorder in recovery, suddenly we're connected by this thing. Whereas if we're not connected, if we don't have that label, and unfortunately it's a label, and I understand the whole argument against it, but if we don't have something that binds us, like how do we connect? Like how do we talk about it?
Totally. We don't have
take-
the words to speak about the thing.
Yeah, like don't take my words away. And you heard my story. You heard my story. Like it was all about not having any vocabulary, you know?
What is the pushback against those words like addict or alcoholic?
The pushback is really sound. It's really well thought out. I think people think, well, all sorts of different pushback, but I think the predominant thinking is that if you call yourself an addict or an alcoholic, suddenly that's what defines you. It becomes your identity, and people want to be so much more than just an alcoholic, just an addict. So there's that thinking. There's also this thinking that calling yourself as an alcoholic, and I understand this too. It's aligning yourself with the problem versus aligning yourself with the solution. It's not really a growth mindset. You're stuck in kind of the issue versus stuck in the solve, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're using entrepreneurial language in the space of addiction and alcoholism. It's interesting.
Yeah. So I always try to say that I'm in recovery, which is also not the most positive thing, but I like thriving too. I think that's a really nice way to couch it, to say this person is thriving in recovery, or I think it's a little bit of your sweet with your bitter, like your salt.
Yeah, there's a window that's open in that description, or there's hope in that description.
Yeah.
It's not just this thing that you can't get out of.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I want to talk about how you came to work at Health, but first I want to understand, like, how do you define addiction? Like, what is it?
Well, you have the DSM criteria, of course, which, it's too boring to even recite. How do I define addiction? I think addiction, simply put, for me, and when I get calls about people struggling, I just met with someone yesterday and she has a family member struggling. And for me, now it's a much more complicated thing, but at the beginning, at the root of it is that simple definition of I don't have control over whether or not I pick up again. And once I do pick up again, I don't have control over the substance. Like I don't, one time, for instance, I was in recovery for an eating disorder for 9 months when I was in Orange County. And when I moved up to the Bay Area, I was having a really hard time. I had lost my support network. I lost my whole Orange County hive, I had been like in this beautiful little womb of supportive women. And then I moved and I had nobody, I had no friends. And I was having a hard time plugging into any of the support communities up here. It's just a really different place. And I went to the market, to the grocery store to buy myself dinner. And as an eating disorder person, that's always hard. It's so difficult to walk around and choose food for yourself. And,
totally.
We don't even have to get into that because it's so hard to understand for people that don't have eating disorders, but it's rife, it's rife with a lot of stuff. So I was at the market, I was at Safeway or something, or Albertsons or something, and I was choosing stuff to eat. And I just made this decision. I'm going to binge and purge just tonight, and as soon as I did, I got this huge wave of comfort and just like this restful feeling, I don't have to white knuckle it. It's going to be fine. And that set off a 4-year binge purge cycle, and that's the definition of addiction, is thinking you can control it and you can't. I would never have anticipated that, right? I thought I was going to binge and purge that night and then the next day be totally fine. And it doesn't always work like that. It could have worked like that, but sometimes it's snaps you into a 4-year samsara cycle from hell.
Yeah.
You never know. It's like a wild beast. So very simply put, I can't help but start again. And once I start again, I don't know when it's going to stop.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. Do you find that or does that definition apply to all facets of life? And what I mean by that is, internet, technology, addictive behaviors that, sort of aren't maybe in substance, but are in other cultural behaviors, such as I'm addicted to my phone. Or is that safe to say, or is that a reach?
I think some people actually are addicted to their phone. Like some people feel the same way about their phone or internet, especially gaming and that kind of thing. I think that's completely legitimate. And it's just case by case. For me, nothing has ever rivaled the power of the pull of anorexia and bulimia and alcoholism, and really drug addiction too. Like I did take my fair bit of pills, my experiences when I couldn't really be drunk all day. I would, steal my boyfriend's Vicodin or, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I think it's just person to person. I don't like to use that. I think it weakens the word a little bit. I think in our culture, you have a lot of, oh, I'm so addicted to that. Right. Oh my gosh, I have a complete shopping addiction. Oh my God. And I think it makes it vanilla. It waters it down, when a true addiction to me is when you have completely lost control and you have consequences, and you probably have people in your life starting to comment on it. It's impacting your day to day. It's a very severe, extreme thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's just case by case.
That makes sense. I have a question from a listener, Cameron. She says, "How does addiction?"
Are we live right now?
No.
Oh.
I had submitted something on Instagram, and she had reached out and wanted to ask a couple of questions, and maybe we can answer them together. I don't know. Cameron says, "How does addiction and how it operates cognitively carry over into less typical understandings like compulsive behaviors and or interpersonal behaviors?"
Oh, do you want to take one?
Yeah. I guess like what that means is, so you have an addict and carrying over into less typical understanding like compulsive behaviors. I don't know. I think I'm not a professional. I'm just a silly feely boy, but gosh, I don't know. I think maybe there's some interconnectivity there, but I also think that there are a number of compulsive behaviors that would not, the Venn diagram would not cross over with like an alcohol addiction or a drug addiction. So I don't know. I really don't know. I don't have much understanding of, and haven't talked much or done much research on compulsive behaviors, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's all a continuum, and not necessarily a linear continuum. I think that sometimes it looks more like kind of a more cyclical continuum, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
With compulsive behaviors, I'm a very compulsive person. And so I sense where this person is coming from completely.
Okay.
Say I'm compulsive. Okay. So for instance, my fiance, Bo, he got me a Nintendo Switch for my birthday last year. And I will stay up all night finishing like Mario or Zelda, like, Breath of the Wild. Like I'm a huge gamer person. Like I love all that stuff. And, Breath of the Wild was such a beautiful video game. And I stayed up all night, like, so I have to catch myself. And to not have that compulsive behavior go into a full addiction, now after 10 years of sobriety, I catch myself and I go to a meeting, I talk about it, I share it, I pick up all the tools that I've learned to, that are kind of at my disposal after 10 years. But I do believe that compulsivity, that compulsion could turn into a full-fledged addiction if I wasn't careful.
Okay.
And I I do try to be careful. I try to be quite careful about those things in my life because I am so compulsive. And sometimes, right now it's about work. Sometimes I feel so good when I lean into work and I work until, late at night, and my other teammates who are all largely addicts and in recovery also work really late, and we're all working. And we all have to be careful not to kind of let it spiral out of control. So that's how I reconcile those two definitions. I think it's more of a continuum than anything else.
That makes total sense to me. And thank you for clarifying my blathering.
No.
Cameron also said, and I think that this is probably a swift answer. She said, can you be addicted to external validation?
Yeah. Well, I should back that up. It just depends. I think, well, what do you think, Noun?
I mean, earlier, to go back to your definition of addiction, my first reaction would be to say no, but maybe there's some nuance there, that is more of a compulsion versus an addiction. I don't know.
Or dependency. I think that, there are all these different words we can use. We can use compulsion, we can use dependency, we can use habit.
Yeah.
Addiction to me is physical. I guess I know too much about it now after so much, after work at health. I have a different definition. I might have answered this differently, but I think addiction is physical. It's like a fire up of dopamine in your brain. It's like the pleasure centers of your brain are just activated. Like when I was talking about that first drink of alcohol when I was 18 in my dorm room, my brain was firing with euphoria. And that doesn't always happen, right? Like I'm sure somebody like my dad or my fiance or Bo, when he's only ever had the neck of a beer, like he just thought it tasted badly. Mm-hmm. And that was it. That was the end for him. He's never really been a drinker, and his whole family is like that. So interesting. And for me, it's like happy juice, it's like, feels so good. I can't even fathom that. So if external validation fires up those neurons or whatever, I'm also not a clinician. So sometimes I use like bunk science, but if it fires up the same pleasure centers in your brain, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. What, let's transition into like what recovery means and what that looks like. Like when you say recovery, what do you mean?
So I also think just as addiction is a self-diagnosed thing, I think recovery is as well. For me, my recovery, the way it looks has changed over time, and having that definition be roomy enough that it can change, like having a flexible mindset, a growth mindset towards the definition of recovery has been really important for me. So when I first entered the rooms of AA back in 2005, for me, it was very much no drinking, right? And anything else was on the table, but it was no drinking. And then I kind of spiraled out of control with smoking pot. And it didn't have anything to do with weed actually, or marijuana. It actually had to do with when I was high, I would do a lot of drug seeking behaviors. And so I was able to kind of re-enter the rooms, get sober again. And that's my sobriety date. That's what I consider my sobriety date in AA, is when I stopped all mind altering substances. So that was my definition, right? From 2007 on. And then, but I was still binging and purging and doing a lot of starving, a lot of dieting and starving and all of that. And so then in 2011 and 2012, the definition recovery expanded for me to include no messing with my food. So no binging, no purging, no starving. And now, so many years later, 11, I guess from 2005, 13 years later, it includes all those things. So no mind altering substances, no binging, purging, starving, and then new things, I think a lot about emotional sobriety, no rage outs or no overly emotional reactions, no impulsive moves, also like it kind of applies to more my relationship with Bo.
Sure.
But, yeah, I think it expands and contract. It just doesn't really contract, hopefully. But for me, it's just expanded over time.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of mean any of those things, right? Like, and when applied to addiction, I think it can mean any of those things. What's it for you?
Yeah, no one's ever asked me that. It's interesting. I have been thinking about this lately because, for the longest time, I never talked about this. And therapy was a great outlet for me, once I had the emotional tools and started really developing those tools, and then this podcast, is a big part of my own recovery as well, for my whole sort of mental health self. But to answer that question, I think it looks like very similar to what you're saying. I think it looks like not having those really physically damaging behaviors that I had during the throes of my own anorexia, and also really developing those tools to understand where that was coming from. I think a huge part of my own recovery was really letting go of some control. I was mediating my parents' marriage, and that was a huge sort of part of it. And so I had to really let go of that control. It was a big control thing for me. And so letting go of that control allowed me to take a step back and then look inward. But that took many years. But I think letting go of that control and not having those really physically altering behaviors that I had before was a huge part of it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Now, at Work It Health, I think I read somewhere where you the term evidence-based recovery.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So, good question. So, evidence-based basis, like it means kind of what it says. It means that we have scientific evidence to back up the courses and to back up things that we teach people. So whereas AA, right, you kind of need both. I'm a firm believer that you need your special recipe, your special concoction of things to recover. And you have to find that for yourself, that special complexion. So evidence-based means that content, so we say that the content is evidence-based, meaning it's been through clinical trials. So, and Cassandra, my sister, she would completely, I know, like if she listens to this, her ears are going to be perking up because she can talk about this forever and much more elegantly than I can. But as I understand it, it means the content that we give patients inside of our program have all been through clinical trials. So they've been clinically tested and proven to help alcoholics and addicts recover. Okay. Versus Alcoholics Anonymous, which is not evidence-based, but it's very like I think it's legit in other ways, right? It's a grassroots organization. It's a very lay knowledge. I think we would really suffer without that in our culture. There's so much wisdom and so much sobriety and so many ways to think and do things. There's so much relating to other people in AA. And that's, I don't know what you call it, but it's evidence-based, I guess, in a different way, but it's not scientific.
Yeah, it's human-based. It's easier to connect with that, at least at the beginning.
Absolutely, for sure. And I think you need both. You know, I think when you blend them together, that's when we get into this bit of there's some tension between the two. Like, for instance, when people in AA, they say, get off of your SSRIs, get off of your Prozac, that's not sober. That kind of goes into their overstepping from their human-based basis and going into a presumed medical professional stance, which is inappropriate. And vice versa. I think it's inappropriate when rehabs charge you $45,000 like Sierra Tucson and then have an AA curriculum, Like, I don't think the blend should happen that way. Yeah. And I think it's caused a lot of problems.
So that leads into my question, like this, I presume this has some grounding in the impetus and the start of Work It Health. Like, tell me about that process, that experience?
Sure. So with Work at Health, I mean, now we're, my whole story. When all was said and done, I went to 8 different facilities, rehabs, and detoxes to get sober. So I had really seen the inside of the current healthcare approach to addiction. And Work It was born out of Lisa and I talking about how faulty and broken that system is. So Lisa is my beloved co-founder, and I met her my first day in the Bay Area. We sat next to each other at a meeting, and we just have been really close ever since. And that was 10 years ago, 9 years ago. And, we have shared so many things over the years, but one thing we've talked about for a very long time is this crazy dissonance, this cognitive dissonance that we were experiencing. So I graduated from design school, quickly started my own firm, worked with a lot of really cool startups and really interesting health interventions. And so by day, I would be in this world of self-driving cars, of healthcare. We were talking about analyzing a drop of blood and, new microbiome stuff, like just incredible things, 23andMe, like genetic testing, new behavioral approaches and interventions. It was amazing. And then at night, I would go to AA meetings and see people die, and see so much love and hope and experience, but also people not getting it and kind of falling by the wayside. And I'd hear about people not being able to get into rehab programs because they weren't, quote unquote, bad enough, especially eating disorders. Like in an eating disorder world, you have to interview basically to get into an eating disorder program. And you have to prove that you fit some sort of arbitrary constructed DSM criteria,
Wow.
So many.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so many times I've had sponsees over the years just not be able to get into Kaiser and into this CDRP or that program because their eating disorder doesn't look like a textbook definition of an eating disorder, for a plethora of different reasons. So Lisa and I basically, after a friend of Lisa's died in Ann Arbor, and after I sold my previous startup, the same day that I sold it, I said to her, let's create this, and I said, I have this like very fledgling idea. And she was almost accepting another job offer at the time. And I said, you were the person to do this, we can do this together. And she's so amazing. She was like, I'm on board for sure. Mm. So we sat around my kitchen table and we sketched out the world we wanted to live in. I tell my staff this all the time. Like when they come to me, I talked to somebody, one of our staff members yesterday, and she said, well, that's not, I'm used to bosses being so different than that. And I'm like, do you want to live in that world? Because I don't, where I'm unapproachable and you can't ask me or tell me things about yourself. And, so that's what we did. So we sort of sketched out what we wanted it to look like and what we wanted evidence-based clinical care to look like for addiction. And that was the start of it. So that was January 2015. And now it's, 2018, and a lot has happened since. But I'm really proud of our work, and I'm proud of our team, and I'm proud of all of our patients and all the people that have gotten great recovery through Work at Health. So yeah.
Walk me through how it works. If I'm someone who is an addict and I come to you, like how does that work?
So let's say you're an opioid addict, because one of our most powerful programs is our opioid use disorder program. So say you are known and and you are addicted to Oxy, or you're addicted to pain pills, right?
Yeah. And
you've been addicted for a while, and you can't really tell anyone. You can't tell on yourself to your doctor because you're scared that he or she is going to snatch your prescription away. Say you've run out of pills and you're considering making the switch to heroin, which is very common. Like when your doctor shopping is over and you can't find anyone else to prescribe for you, oftentimes people go on the black market and they go, to Civic Center Bar in San Francisco or wherever, and they get their drugs and their pills illegally.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah. So, and that's really common. That's what most people do. So what do you do? So you start kind of looking into options, right? So you Google late at night, probably when nobody's watching, you're Googling, not that anyone ever watches you Google, but late at night you might
Everyone's
Google.
watching, don't you know?
Everyone is watching. Everyone is watching. But you Google drug detox or recover from drug abuse, whatever it is, recover from painkillers. Then Work at Health would show up in those searches. And with addiction, there's a large pre-contemplation period where people consider whether or not to get sober for a long time or to start getting help. So this is something that Callie, our head of marketing, has always felt really strongly about, is having people land in a place with a lot of content. So she's developed the Work at Health blog, which has article after article after article detailing, all the facets of opioid use disorder and other disorders and addiction. So usually they start reading the blog and they become a fan and they start following Work It, and it's 2 to 3 months in that they'll actually call us. But when they do call us, they always get a person. So always really wonderful. We really train our staff to be empathetic. We do a lot of empathy training and talking a lot about compassion and compassion fatigue and treating people like humans. Do you
have a lot of addicts on your team?
We do. We have a lot. We have a lot of Al-Anon people, which means we have a lot of people with addicts in their life. And we have a lot of addicts. Lisa and I are both in recovery, as you know, and a lot of people on our staff are in recovery. So I think that's really important as well. I think maybe I'm a little bit old school about this, but I think there is something to say for one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic or one addict talking to another addict. Like, it's just hard to understand if you haven't been there,
Absolutely.
And it's just such a human thing. So, a lot of times when I see clients, like I try to not go to the clinic that much, but when I do go to the clinic sites and I see somebody and they're like crying in the corner, I'll sit down with somebody and say, hey, I've been right where you are. I get it. I get what you're doing. And I want you to know that there's a place for you here. And I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy you're here. And just the change in posture and the light coming on and people's demeanor is incredible if you just get vulnerable and say, I get it. I've been there.
That's empathy. I love it.
Yeah. You, me, and empathy. But no, it's empathy. And I wish the world had more of that. So we talk about this constantly nonstop at Work It. So what we do for people is we try to get them in as soon as possible. And we do one in-person visit. And then everything after that is online. So their in-person visit is when we really have the opportunity to have them meet their care team in person. Because I don't believe technology will solve this issue. I believe humans will solve this issue. Mm-hmm. And I believe that we can use technology to make it more accessible, through telemedicine and much more affordable, because rehab is so expensive, and, much easier to understand when someone needs more care, right? But beyond that, I think humans will solve it. So our technology sort of enables humans to do their jobs better. So they meet their care team in person. So that means they meet their counselor and they meet their nurse or their prescribing MD. And if appropriate, and sometimes people don't, they just go into counseling. But if appropriate, we give them medication that helps, and usually Suboxone, that helps with a bunch of different things, but it helps with the withdrawal. Withdrawal is like the number one reason that people don't stop painkillers or heroin. Helps with the withdrawal, and it helps with the cravings. And once they're stabilized on medication, then we really begin intensive treatment, and it's all online. So a lot of times the reason they don't get into recovery is because it's so difficult to leave your life for 30 days to go to an inpatient rehab program, or it's so hard to go to even an outpatient program 3 times a week. Maybe that would be too much for someone from 9 to 11 on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's really inaccessible. So a lot of times we have people that are, single moms or holding down 3 jobs, and they do their drug testing in the bathroom at work, or they're texting their counselors when they're in line at CVS, or, taking care of their kids. We try to make it as easy for people to recover as it is for people to order an Uber, and that's it. And so they go through the program. It takes about 3 to 6 months to go through Work at Core, which is the core of the program. So all the time they're learning, they're going through courses online, they're chatting with their counselor, they meet once a week through video conference with their doctor. And then after that initial period, they go to monthly visits, just like you would a step down process. So they go to monthly visits where they're getting monthly prescriptions and monthly meetings with their counselor. And then they get opt-in courses that they can take. And then they graduate, Wow. They always, that's kind of the long and the short of it.
And maybe I missed this, how often are they connecting with a counselor?
So the first 3 to 6 months, they're connecting weekly. It depends on the patient, how long that period is. Sometimes patients need more care and sometimes they need less care. It just depends. Like, for instance, me, I went through 9 months of treatment, but my good friend who started with me, she only had to go through 3, but she was 10 years older than me at the time. She was just ready to get better.
Yeah.
And I took a little bit longer. So it all depends. We try to do a one-size-fits-one model where we build the care plans. We build the care plans around each individual patient, and their treatment looks like what they need versus a round peg square hole problem where you just say, go through this track. This is what you're going to do. And we spit you out in 30 days.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like, how do you feel like this is the future of healthcare? Like, in what ways is this different and more sort of groundbreaking than what is currently happening?
So currently, well, I hope so, that this is the future of healthcare. I think currently with healthcare, it's a very complicated. I've worked in a lot of different markets at this point and been a part of a lot of startups, started my own companies, been an entrepreneur for a long time. Actually, and that was when we worked together, that was the only job I've ever had.
Oh, really?
That funny, Irvine office. I've never had a job past that. I always worked for myself. It really destroyed me, I guess. It was the only thing I needed to see of corporate culture. But where was this just going? I think the future of healthcare is making patients their own advocates, and I think it's going to look. Healthcare is going to look a lot more like a consumer world of choice, right? Where you can go on an open market and you can choose which healthcare you need, and you can have transparent options, so you can know what things cost, and you can know what diagnoses are, and you can understand your plethora of options. I think for so long, we haven't really understood what doctors do, and we haven't made choices for ourselves. We've been really handcuffed by HMOs and insurance and regulations, state we're in, city we're in, accessibility, et cetera. And I think all of that will crack open. So I think telemedicine opens that wide, like it cracks it way open when it comes to accessibility. So literally, like the beds problem, a lot of times rehabs can't accept new patients because they don't have enough beds. They call it the beds problem. That won't be the case anymore with telemedicine. You have different constraints, of course, but you don't have a brick and mortar constraint. I think that's wonderful. I think, some of the stuff Obama is doing with the Affordable Care Act and kind of breaking open the black box of insurance companies is wonderful. I think we see a bit of contraction now, of course, and there's a bit of backlash, but overall the trend is going towards a more open market, and that's good for all parties.
Okay. Interesting. Well, what else? I think we covered everything with Work It Health. I mean, I think it's fascinating, and I like the idea. I think it's swifter, it's cleaner. It's also more about, as you said, the patient, and it's that patient sort of advocating for themselves. And I think that's really a huge part of mental health as a whole. And so I'm encouraged by that model in Work It Health.
I am too. I think addiction has largely been treated as a criminal justice issue. And actually, a couple of days ago, Callie lives in Arizona, our head of marketing, and she was just in town. And we went to East Oakland, which is, a kind of dangerous part of town. And we went to a methadone clinic to see what people were choosing. So this methadone clinic is more expensive than Work It, much more. Doesn't take insurance. It's cash only. and is the other option, right, for our patients. And we went, and it was just bulletproof glass, line around the corner, not very good hours, bars on the windows. It was really, it felt more like a jail than a place of healthcare. And that's what we want to push up against and say, hey, we deserve so much better than this. We deserve transparent outcomes. Like, we deserve a great place to go. We deserve great options. We deserve to know where our money is going. That's what we're pushing up against, That's what we're fighting for.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in that example, there's some geographic context there, but I do think that there's also a lot of cultural judgment on the part of, addicts or toward addiction and addicts, I think, and maybe that's part of it too. Yeah,
I think so. Definitely. I think for a long time, addicts and alcoholics were jailed,
Yeah.
We were put in jails and prisons. And, it's only been in the last 10 to 15 years that people have started to look at alcoholism as a brain disease and addiction as a brain disease. And that's pretty normal with healthcare trends. It's we're in the world of AIDS and not acknowledging it. And then later there's the HIV cocktail and so much awareness about it. I think alcoholism and addiction is kind of heading that way as well.
Obviously technology is a huge part of your company, like, as annoying as Twitter internet trolls are, there is something to say about technology being a facilitator for this sort of openness that we're seeing now, and people being more open and sharing their stories and embracing vulnerability and through podcasts, through these technologies that we have access to now.
I think it's wonderful. I think everyone has a voice now, I mean, still you have some issues, but I think it's democratized the world in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you do have the problems and the trolls and all of that, but I don't know, either the winds at your back or in your face. And I think the winds at our back here when it comes to these things.
Yeah, totally. Well, let's start to wrap it up. Before we get to your plugs and where people can connect with you, Robin, I want to talk about empathy heroes. We always wrap up the show talking about empathy heroes. These are people that we know personally in our lives that are good embracers of empathy, or even just fictional characters. I've used fictional characters in the past. So, would you like to name your empathy hero first, or would you like me to go first?
You go first.
Sure. Most people choose that option. So let's see. This week, I'm going to name my, so as I spoke about at the top of the show, Jessica and I have been in the throes of this house stuff, and it's a first for us. And I'm just grateful that we have had our real estate / mortgage people to help us through it. They've been so gracious with their time and answering all of our many questions. And sure, they are financially motivated, but they're kind. They're kind people, and we were lucky because you hear kind of gross stories about this world of real estate. And so I was lucky, and I feel like the real estate folks that have helped us on the agent side, on the mortgage side, have just been so empathetic and kind. And so I'm going to name them as my empathy heroes this week.
I love that. That's so sweet.
Thanks.
And they were working with us because our people weren't as kind, but yeah.
That's a bummer.
No, they were great, but I don't know if I would be naming them in the empathy hero section of this podcast. Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm excited for you guys. I really am. I'm going to look up that area you're moving to. Yeah, I think for my empathy hero, we just had a work situation come up where I was able to be fair, and be kind and a human. Someone told me about a difficult situation they were going through, and I was able to leverage my position as a boss to choose the kinder option, if that makes sense, without getting into details. And I think that really comes from my dad. Maybe I'm thinking about him because we were just talking about how we were raised, but he was such a good boss to people. At one time, I think he employed I don't know, maybe 200 people or 100 people. I don't know. It was a lot. And I've always heard through people who work for him or around him or his business partner about how deeply kind he is, and fair and stern and tough, but fair. And he's really beloved, and I think sometimes I was listening to Oprah the other day, out of all people. She was talking about how sometimes people have small souls and sometimes people have big souls. And she has a big one because she affects millions of people around the world. And I think my dad is kind of like that. He touches so many lives, but he doesn't do it for the cash and prizes. He's such a decent person. And I think seeing that as an example, I'm so lucky that I'm able to kind of, hopefully in my best moments, kind of do the same thing as he did and choose kindness, where I could choose something else. So he's my empathy hero today.
Oh, I love that. That's
great.
Cool. Well, Robin, let's where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about Work It Health? All those things.
So Work It Health is an online addiction care program, and we have a wonderful blog, as I mentioned. You can go to www.workithealth.com or just Google Work It Health. We'll come right up. It's work it too, it works if you work it. It's based on that saying, which is funny. And so you can follow us on social. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter. I have a Twitter account now, which I've been pushed by my co-founder to do for a long time. I think I have 5 followers, but no, follow Work It's Twitter. It's much more interesting and great. And that's it.
Awesome. Well, listeners, all those links will be in the show notes. So check that out when this episode launches. So Robin, thank you so much for being on You Me Empathy and sharing your story and sharing the story of Work It Health. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you too. I think this is wonderful, and I'm excited. And please say hello to Jessica. I'm such a super fan from afar.
Hold on that point. And to you listeners, I'm here, you're here. We're here together on this wayward, overwhelming, awe-inspiring pale blue dot. We have each other. It's You Me Empathy.